After months without stimulus aid from the government, the much anticipated small business loan program restarts today, but it's not open for everyone. Lenders with a focus on minority-owned small businesses get a head start. And this comes after complaints that Paycheck Protection Program funds were not equally distributed in the first go-round. Madison Mills is here now to address all this in our weekly How I Work segment. Maddie, start us off and tell us who gets access to these loans today.
Right, Scarlett. So like you mentioned, this is a long time coming for small business owners here in the U.S. And today we're starting with those minority and Black-owned small businesses that are able to start working with lenders that specialize in prioritizing these groups to get this funding. And as a reminder, the Paycheck Protection Program was started earlier on in the pandemic to apply funding for these businesses that were struggling due to the economic impact of COVID-19. And the program was stopped for a little while. Now it's back. And there's this shift in the line of who can start getting this funding when, in order to address some of the inequities that you mentioned, Scarlett. We saw that about 75% of the funding available through this program was doled out to businesses that are in majority white neighborhoods. And that's just one example of the unequal distribution of this funding that today's news is hopefully going to course correct a bit.
Okay, so we know what kinds of businesses stand to participate in this go-round. Do we know what kind of financial shape your business has to be in to be eligible for these loans?
It's a great question, and there is a lot more specificity around that this time around, which is exciting for small businesses to get a little bit more clarity. We know that if you're applying for your second small business loan, you have to prove that there was a 25% drop-off in your sales during at least 1 quarter of 2020. But it's also not just financial. You also have to prove that you are, in fact, a small business. You have to be able to prove that you have under 300 employees in order to get this funding.
Yeah, that was a problem last time around. We know that a lot of funds were distributed to companies, to people that didn't necessarily need them. How did that happen? How are you going to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes again?
Absolutely. So one of the big changes that we're seeing is kind of the closure of some loopholes that allowed bigger companies, including restaurant chains, to be able to get funding for each individual restaurant they had across the U.S. instead of just getting one application in for funding. So we saw restaurants like PF Chains and Shake Shack getting up to $10 million in funding, and that's not going to happen this time around because these loopholes have been closed. Also, last time we saw a lot of technical issues on the website where small businesses could apply for these loans, and the back end of the site is changing this time around to adjust for that as well.
Okay, so we've learned from our mistakes, and hopefully we won't be making the same mistakes this time around. Of course, all of this comes as the U.S. economy teeters. I mean, things are going to get better, but the latest jobs report indicates that there's still a long way to go. So give us some context here about the state of the U.S. economy as this aid gets distributed.
Right, Scarlett. So it's really impossible to overstate kind of the dire situation we're in here in the U.S., not only with COVID, but also with the economy. Like you mentioned, we lost 140,000 jobs here in the U.S. last month, which is the biggest drop-off we've seen since April, which again was the first month we were able to even see the economic impact of COVID in this country. So this is a huge drop-off that indicates that the economy is really struggling following the effects of this virus. There also stands to be about 5 million people who could slip under the poverty line in January alone. We've already seen millions of people slip under that line throughout the course of this pandemic. And again, this virus continues to surge. We're getting worse and worse numbers in terms of record deaths and hospitalizations and positive test results every day. So experts are concerned that this is only going to continue to be an issue.
Yeah, sobering numbers, definitely. And of course, all of this makes the need to vaccinate the population all the more important. I'm going to put you on the spot here because I know you cover this daily, Maddie. What do we know about the vaccine distribution in places like New York City where there hasn't been enough distributed despite the city and the state getting a lot of the doses?
It's so interesting, Scarlett. Here in New York, I've just been covering this all day, like you mentioned. The vaccine started to be available for folks who are 75 and older today, but there are a lot of issues with the sign-up process. There are questions that you need to answer online to sign up for a vaccine are a little bit vague, and myself and a lot of my friends were able to get through the entire vaccine portal this morning and confirm ourselves for appointments, knowing that we're not eligible. So we all ended up canceling our appointments because we know that it's not our turn in the line. But but it's pretty concerning that people who are in their 20s and healthy and have no pre-existing conditions were able to sign up for a vaccine slot. We do know that some health officials more broadly across the U.S. are saying that it doesn't really matter where you are in the vaccine line. You should just get these shots into people's arms. That's what we've heard from Surgeon General Jerome Adams, for example. But Cuomo has definitely taken the position that people need to wait their turn, that we need to focus on priority groups 1A and 1B before moving on to other people.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem, isn't it? That the different states have different approaches. New York's Andrew Cuomo, of course, very strictly following the CDC guidelines. In Florida, it's kind of a different story where they're basically opening up the vaccine to anyone who's 65 or older. And that's a huge proportion of Florida's population.
Absolutely, and it's such an important point. I'm from Florida, and I have family members who were trying to figure out the vaccine portal earlier today, and it's very difficult for older individuals to navigate. So that's something that we're going to have to monitor as well, Scarlett.
Maddie, thank you so much for giving us an update there on the COVID vaccines as well.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.